allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Good evening, everybody. It's wonderful to see you all here. To begin our meeting tonight, we will actually begin with a public hearing. This hearing is being held to hear all interested parties and residents regarding a proposed resolution to authorize an increase in exemption from school property taxes for qualified low-income senior citizens and persons with disabilities pursuant to sections 467 and 459C of the Real Property Tax Law. Is there any discussion? We will now open the hearing. Is there any discussion?
I just have one question.
Okay.
A quick question. Is this something that we are setting and modifying, or is this something that the state is changing the threshold for and we have to adopt as local?
So the state has set forth the ability of this ceiling to be raised for this limited income exemption, and it's the opportunity for school districts if they want to opt in. I know other municipalities, towns, Nassau County have opted in to this, and now school districts are discussing it across the county. A lot of them around this time of year to decide whether they'd like to opt in or not. So it's something that, if the board decides that it's not something they want to go forward with this year, next year is another opportunity to do it.
So we're not setting it, the state said it, we're just adopting, or choosing to adopt
The state set the guidelines, they set the new ceiling, and it's up to the school district just to opt into it. We're not actually setting the limits.
Thank you.
Can I ask a question?
Yes, Ms. Burrow.
Okay, so just so everybody out here has some idea what we're talking about, could you just give us a brief overview of either Dr. Gagner or Mr. DeVito of what we're talking about here?
I'll let Mr. DeVito do that.
Exactly. So there are exemptions that resident taxpayers may take advantage of regarding different, let's say, classifications. In this case, we're talking about senior citizens, and we're also talking about persons with disabilities. But for both of those exemptions, again, it allows them to pay a lower amount on their property taxes. There is also an income eligibility. So it's not just all senior citizens or all persons who are disabled, but there also has to be a limited income criteria that's also met. There are a variety of exemptions that anybody who's a property owner can take advantage of. And several years ago, the board decided to entertain another category of, like veterans exemption and things of that sort. So periodically, these things come up. The board to take a position on whether they want to allow these taxpayers to take advantage of a property tax exemption, meaning they don't have to pay the full amount that they would otherwise have to pay based on the assessment of the property. So it just gives the people who are in these categories a break.
Okay, so has the school board in Long Beach already adopted an exemption for senior citizens and persons with disabilities?
They have, this is wrong.
Okay,
It's something
so what we're doing here tonight is ascertaining if, since the state has increased, you can only have a certain amount of income, I think it is, in order to qualify for this exemption. So they're raising that income level by, I think it's about $5,000, right?
The ceiling, what's being proposed is to go from about 37,000 to about 58,000.
Oh, okay, so it's about a $20,000 increase. So if we were to approve this tonight, which is on our agenda to either approve or deny, we would only be increasing the exemption from 37,000, the amount of taxes that you would save between 37 and 58,000.
Not the amount of taxes you would say, those who are eligible, right?
Right, but people who have the salary income under $58,000.
That's right.
And if those people already have incomes under $37,000, they already get the exemption. So it's just that class of people with incomes from $38,000 to $58,000.
I think there's also another component of it is that if there was a partial exemption for people band under that 37,000, they all move up to that 50% threshold.
Okay, thank you, that's all I have.
That's right.
I'm just curious, how do we notify the people who are eligible for this change? We have to do accept the recommendation. How will people notify that they're changing practice?
I don't have the answer to that, Dr. Ryan, I can find out.
I mean, do we run it right on a website, do we put something in our updated newsletter when we put it out periodically? I think it's one thing to sit here and talk about it, hopefully to pass it, to be sensitive to those people, but also to give them notice that it is in effect, certainly in a timely way before taxes apply. So I think that's one of these.
Well, I know that in terms of information, we're required, if any Board of Education is interested in participating for this coming year, the deadline is January 2nd. I know that the information goes to the assessor's office, and the assessor then recalculates what those exemptions are when they send out the new tax bills for the next school year. So I know that they will find out that, oh, I'm a senior and now I'm eligible. I believe it's would be coming from the county. But I think I'll ask my point person over there, is there something else that the school district could have notice of so that we can send it out?
Yeah, thanks.
Ms. Case? No? Mr. Davina, my only question is, do we know the percent of our population that actually is eligible for this?
So, if you want to know the percent, I don't have that calculated, but I can tell you that it's not a lot, right? So, I think I can do the, like, kind of the back of the envelope, but I think there are about under 100 who fit this category, who are disabled, who are also senior citizens, and also have that limited income, because they get that now. What the next band is we don't know, right? And that's part of what we don't have from the counties. They're not giving us the data of, okay, now who's going to fit in between that $37,000 category and the $58,000. So I can tell you that there are about 100 resident taxpayers, both in Class 1 and Class 2, who take advantage of those two exemptions to date. But there are so few compared to about 10,000 taxpayers in those two categories that the impact is not going to be very great on everybody else, because, with the school district, we ask for the tax levy on the whole community, and everybody pays whatever their share is depending on their assessment. So if somebody pays a little bit less, somebody else is going to be paying a little bit more. Where in other types of tax collections, it may just be less that the municipality gets in terms of taxes, but for us, it's always going to be a shift. So I can't tell you the exact percentages, but my sense is that since there were so few compared to all the other taxpayers, that it's not going to have a big impact on everybody else.
Thank you, Mr. DeVito. Since this is the public hearing piece, the public can also come up and ask us questions, and I ask you, if you do have a question for the public hearing piece, if you would please step up to the podium and state your name and your address. Okay, thank you. Now, do we vote on this now, or do we close the hearing first? Okay, now I'm closing the hearing. The hearing is now closed, and now we will begin our regular meeting. Before we begin, I give the report over to the superintendent of schools. I would just like to say a few words. For the past few weeks, I've actually had the pleasure with many of our trustees to go visit our schools and to see our students and staff shine in many plays, concerts, award ceremony, such as Midsummer Night's Dream, high school, the middle school play, the West School concert, which we visited last night, and fall awards. And I just want to say thank you so much to all of our teachers and staff and our coaches. You are central figures in our students' lives, and just being there, positive atmosphere, you are all really making a difference. So thank you for that. And I'd also like to thank our trustees for going and visiting the schools. We all take time to go see you guys because we all care so much. And now I'm moving it up to our superintendent.
Thank you. So tonight, we'll have our final strategic plan update. Each board meeting since late last spring, we've been discussing our strategic plan the 5-year plan that the board will adopt in January, and to set high-level goals for the path of our district over the next 5 years. And, you know, you've got many emails from me asking to answer questions, give input, and our steering committee has met 5 times during the fall, and helped to really correlate this data and put it into something that looks like a recommendation. The board was presented with this recommendation this week, and it will be on the district website as of tomorrow morning with an invitation for people to send in final comments on the proposed plan, the draft of the plan. More than anything else, though, I'd like to invite our community to the board meeting on January 10th, where the board will discuss the plan, make some changes, it's the board's plan ultimately, and adopt a plan that will hopefully lead us into the future. And just personally, I can say that it was really a wonderful process to go through and to hear all of the dreams and ideas of our community for our students, and how we all really keep that as our heart in Long Beach, that we want to be a community that provides the best possible education for our kids. So I think it's a plan to be proud of, and I look forward to discussing that more with the board on January 10th. And with that, I will, speaking of.
Can I just make one comment about that? I do want to encourage anyone who hasn't read their Connections magazine, which I'm sure you can pick a copy of up in the building if you come to your home. It had a really beautiful, well-written article of an overdraft of the strategic planning process and what the committee hopes to accomplish. So if you have any questions about that before January 10th, and you come to the meeting to share all your ideas, if you haven't shared them already, please read that.
Any other trustee would like to comment on the strategic plan first, before we move on to the budgetary part?
I'll just make a quick comment. Of all the years that I've been in this district, this is the first time I've seen anything like this happen. And I think a lot of times stakeholders, community members, don't feel like their voices are heard, or they have these ideas and don't know how to move forward. So I really commend the district for putting it forward, and I think it's really nice when we hear from the community, and I really hope that people come out. We have more attendance at our next meeting to hear more of what everybody wants, because ultimately it's not, it's not our district, it's yours. So please attend.
And I would also like to add to, this type of plan really shows a lot of transparency of our district, and it also proves how much we care about what our community has to say. And Dr. Gallagher did an amazing job reaching out, not just to parents, but to community members and to students, to find out what their hopes and dreams were for our school. So I really commend you, Dr. Gallagher, for your hard work, and all the community members who volunteered their time to work on this. Yeah. I actually thought my teacher voice was carrying okay there. Okay, move along.
And with that, speaking of planning, we're in the middle of, beginning really of the budget planning process. So I'd like to invite Mr. Vito to walk us through the preliminary budget draft overview and some of the budget studies.
Thank you, Dr. Gallagher. Good evening, everybody. Tonight, we're going to present our preliminary draft and it's a budget overview. We're going to talk about some high-level concepts that we want to think about as we move forward in the budget process this year. But first, I want to talk about what our total budget is at this point. And what I say is, this is based on the current program that we have at next year's rates. So before we meet with staff, before we make any changes, except for one or two items that I'll talk about throughout this evening's presentation, what you see here is actually a reduction in what we're proposing for next year. You'd be like, wow, oh my gosh, before you even talk about program, we already have a reduction in the proposed budget for next year compared to this year, but it's deceiving. Okay, it's deceiving because what's not in the new figure for next year is about $4.2 million of the capital projects that we have in the current year budget that we had a corresponding revenue for because it was in-house. Right, we had money already on hand. I'm going to talk a little bit about that later, but it's just something to keep in mind because when we were doing this last year for this year's budget, right, remember we kept the tax levy level, but it was a big budget increase. And people kept saying like, how can you increase the budget by, $4 million and keep the tax levy level, right? It's because we already had that corresponding revenue on hand for those capital expenses. So now we're in a little bit of the reverse, right? We don't have that revenue source any longer, and the budget is coming down, but it's not coming down to that same level as the $4 million, and we'll talk a little bit about that. So here's what we're proposing, right? Just for current year's programs, next year's rates, without doing any changes or without really needing and taking a look at program for next year. All right, just a few categories by object. So staff salaries, it's going up about 1.9%. The equipment, the same, because we haven't talked about any new equipment that may be needed or anything that may be a reduction. Vendor services, already I know based on what's happening in the current year, that we're going to need another $300,000 for contract transportation. Some of the efficiencies we thought we were going to achieve, and when we met again this time last year, you'll see we reduced the budget from the prior year by $300,000. Didn't really pan out, mostly because of some additional students and some driver shortages. So we need to put that $300,000 back because we're not really able to go to a lower level, which then brings us back to the level we were for the past couple of years, about 1.4 million of contract transportation. And supplies, basically the same, just a slight recategorization of some teacher college supplies that as we're living through the year, we realize, needs to be in a different code up in vendor services. Debt service. Thankfully, the debt service for next year is going to be a slight reduction in interest, but basically the same level. Fringe benefits, here's the big addition here, about $2 million, basically because of health insurance premiums. So what we've seen is starting January 1, that takes us through the whole calendar year next year, is an increase from 12 to 22% in the different coverage categories. Right? We typically put in about 10% for that January increase. What we're seeing now, January 1, 2 categories 12 or 3, and the rest 22%. So a big increase. So for the following year, right, we have to at least build in the first 6 months at those higher rates, and we also need a placeholder. Now, for right now, we have a placeholder for next January, right, January of 2024, of 10%. But we'll talk about that, maybe modifying that a little bit in another slide. Transfer to other funds, you see a reduction of about $4.6 million. That's what I was talking about before, right? That's the line where you'll see that big reduction in the budget because we don't have those capital projects anymore. We had to have a transfer for the school lunch fund to cover a prior balance that was carried over of about $156,000. And I took out $200,000 allotment that we usually put in for our reserve funds because this is going to be a bit of a tight budget year coming up, and it's an area where we can hold off on funding future capital projects. We don't need to put it as a line item in the budget, although I usually recommend it. I think we're going to need that $200,000 to try to really come in a little bit as low as possible. So you see here in this line a reduction of about 4.6, but you add the 2 million here, you add the 1.4, the 300, and that's where you get to that $4 million again. And that's why the number that you see here for next year, just starting the conversation, is about at the same level where we were. That's the trade-off that we have between those different areas of the budget. Let's take a look at some highlights, right? For salaries, we have our step and annual increases for staff. We don't have the longevity in this version yet. The health insurance I just talked about in some of those coverage categories. Increase of students attending out of district schools. That's really the driver from that increase in the contract transportation. But you'll see as we talk about special education for next year, you're going to see an increase in those categories because we're already seeing an increase in the current year because we are having some more students going to out of district placements than we even thought we were going to have. ERS and TRS, there's a bit of an increase in the ERS. That's causing a net increase between both pension funds, but the TRS, fortunately, the employer contribution rate did go down a little bit. But on balance, we do have to increase the budget a little bit because of pension fund increases. Some things that I want the board to think about as we start moving forward in the budget preparation process is, are you comfortable with going for a 7% as a projected increase for the following January? Because the premium increase has been at such a large rate this January that it's probably unlikely that there's going to be another 10% increase, but it is a bit of a risk, right? If we do lower it to 7%, we do save about $308,000. So as we're thinking about areas where what we can do to bring that budget number down, possibly putting a 7% placeholder in for next January as opposed to the 10% that we've been doing, because the rates just went up by such a large amount, will save us that $300. Now, some people have asked in the past when I've talked about health insurance, why are you putting a 10% escalation factor in? Isn't that kind of high? Well, I'm glad that we did that for the current year, because we don't have to add money to that code, because we do have enough based on what they did increase. But 2 years in a row, that's highly unlikely. So I'm going to probably lean towards just a 7%, just again, to try to keep that budget number down. And something else that we don't know yet is we don't know what kind of staff retirements we're going to have. Typically, a staff member retires, we're able to bring in a newer staff member at a lower salary rate. It does save some money, right? It helps offset some of these other costs. So if 10 teachers retire, right, we could save about $700,000 there. So between the $300,000, if we lower that escalation rate from 10% to 7%, and if we factor in about $700,000 in salary savings, that's $1 million right there. Okay, so that's ways that we can bring that number down. What I have here is the revenue slide from this past budget preparation for this current year. So what you're going to see as we do this, and then we wait a couple months before we do that, there'll be another column here, right? The 2023-24 revenue projection. So we just talked a little bit high level in terms of budget, in terms of expenses. Now let's switch gears and talk a little bit about revenue. Will we get more state aid? Hopefully. Every year we usually get a little bit, not a lot, but a little bit. So we could see this figure go up a little bit. The LIPA pilot, probably not a lot of money we're going to get additional in pilot through LIPA. Other revenue, maybe a little bit, not too much. You see the big increase here because we right-sized the tuition that we're getting from other districts in terms of Island Park. We weren't sure what was happening through COVID, if we really were going to get these students from the other districts or if they were going to do something different. But no, it turns out we are getting, that same, the largest share of Island Park students, even prior compared to those students going to private schools. So we've already pretty much right-sized this figure, maybe a little bit here. So I'm not really expecting a lot in these three categories. This now goes away, right? That's that almost $4.3 million that we had on hand, and we are going to have to put the balance in tax levy. So I just want to prepare the board, prepare the community for the fact that 3 years in a row, we've held that tax levy level, right? 2 years of a 0% increase is zero. That levy was level for 3 years in a row. There's not a lot of room in these other categories to say, oh, well, we're going to get a lot more in state aid, or we're going to get other revenue, or appropriate more fund balance. It's a little bit risky. I don't really want to go that much more than $1 million, and we've already kind of done that big fund balance adjustment for the current year. So the message that I want to deliver tonight is that wherever we end up in terms of that budget to budget, right, we're going to have to pick it up in tax levy. So even though the budget is coming down, right, remember, we're losing this as a revenue source. So already you take let's say $4.3 million away from this figure. That's where our starting point is in terms of the budget. So let's go just to some plain numbers. 2%. I doubt that the tax levy growth factor is going to be anything lower than 2% because of the rate of inflation. I know sometimes the board says, oh, I don't want to go to the 2%, I want to go under. Right now, I think our range for thinking about this is between 2% and 3.5% of an increase, okay? Based on the level of expenditures. We take that $1 million off, we're more in the mid-twos. We look for some other savings as we prepare the budget, maybe we can get closer to 2. But I'm not really seeing a lot of opportunity to go below 2 for next year. just not seeing it in terms of the health insurance number. There's just 2 million right there, right? You take a look at that health insurance increase, you're already at that 2%, right? So those are high-level thinking where we are, just something for the board to consider as we move forward with the budget process, just what we're working with in terms of salary increases, health insurance increases, pension fund increases, a little bit on the contract transportation side. We'll see what we can do as we meet with staff, administrators, as we go forward, looking at programs, see where we can come up with some savings, but we're already in a tough spot. And I already covered this. How will the district bridge the gap between the preliminary projections for 2023-24 and the current level of revenues that we just reviewed? Will the district receive any additional state aid? And will there be any increases in other subcategories of other revenue that might mitigate an increase in the tax levy? Questions and comments from the board?
Ms. Rana? Thank you, Mr. DeVito. It was a wonderful presentation. I want to start from actually my only question is on the revenue projections. Where in our revenue projections is the ARP budget that we're going to be receiving for next year?
So that's not even in this, because the expenses that we charge to ARP and every other grant that we have in the district is not in the general fund. We're talking about general fund budget, general fund revenue sources. Anything that we have in ARP, it's separate. It's in a separate fund. It's funding that we know is available, that expenses get charged to it, and it's not included in this budget. So when we talk about where we're at in terms of our total budget, 151.2 million, it does not include the money that we're spending, whether it's Title I or ARP or any of the other grants that we have in the district. That's additional program, additional funding.
How? Like, it just seems like impossible for me as a trustee to even understand the bigger picture. You know, because this is going to be this coming year, after this year, in September of 2024, that ARP money goes away, right?
We have one more year.
Right. So now is going to be, as we prepare the budget for this year, I get it that it's going to be tight.
Yeah.
But we also are going to need to start thinking about the fact that we have created some really wonderful things using our money that we may or may not want to hold on to. And so I guess maybe my question is it your recommendation that we not deal with that until the 2023-24 school year, that this year we just focus on coming in with a tight budget and letting ARP be ARP for another year?
That's what I would recommend.
Oh, yes, okay, good, that's excellent, okay. Good, all right, I had one other question, and now I don't remember what it was. Oh, I was so excited. You made me so happy. Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
So,
Wait, Sam, can I just piggyback off that for 1 second? So my concern with that though is then going to 2024, losing that funding.
24-25, right?
Yes, 24-25, sorry, yes, that school year. You know, Ms. Rona did allude to the idea that we do have these programs that we've created that rely on that. So now my concern is, are we putting ourselves in a bad spot where we're not forward thinking enough ahead? Because I know it's nice to say, right now, we're gonna keep it as low as possible, but what I don't wanna see is then that next year, you know, now we have to take things away that the community wants for their children that we've built that are wonderful, or increase the taxes, you know, or go higher.
Well,
So I just
what's the alternative? That's what I would have to say,
That's
right?
your job?
Yeah.
That's not my job. I just want to say publicly, no, I'm just kidding. It is a concern. I just want to voice my concern, and it's something that I think as a board we do need to consider, and I would look to you, to your advice
Right.
on how we renegotiate that.
So,
Could
yeah,
I
sure,
just
go ahead.
say one thing, and you can correct me if I'm wrong. One thing we could do is come in with a tax levy this year that is closer to the 2%. You know, if we were to go to zero this year, we we lose that base for next year as well, so we would have to make deeper cuts next year. You know, I think all of us are aware of the wonderful things we've been able to do with the art money, and we are always thinking creatively, how can we keep this, maybe we can find efficiencies here. We can't necessarily do anything about that this year, except put forth as responsible a budget as we can, and perhaps look to, you know, not be at 0, but to be at 2% or 3%, so that we're kind of preparing for next year. Is that correct?
That sounds good. Yeah.
So, just so I understand, our operating budget is going, our global spending plan is going down because we have less capital improvements being put into the operating
Right.
budget. And then these third-party costs that we have not much control over, like healthcare costs set by the insurance providers and state, et cetera, are going up. So now our operating costs to provide the same service we have is going up regardless.
Correct.
And since we've been lean for the last 2 years, we now have to make up the difference on the taxpayer if we want to maintain programs and services in consideration of those higher rates.
I guess, you know, I'm grateful, and I know that we all really are grateful that we've been able to pass along all those savings to the taxpayers over the past few years. And we have been lean, and we have been able to preserve program, and we have been able to use some of this grant money to enhance our programs, right? But now that those fixed costs, right, those fixed operational costs, health insurance, and some of the contract costs for salary increases, right, are going up, there's no place to really say, hey, you know, we can still come in at a very low tax levy without reducing program.
Or
Right.
other revenue sources.
There aren't any other revenue sources, right? There may be more state aid, right? So of course, whatever dollar of additional state aid we get, we'll pass that along, and that'll be one less dollar that we need to, you know, have in the tax levy. But what's important is that this budget is going to go down, right? Because that's that gross budget you were talking about. That included a large capital piece, right? Included $4 million of capital spending that we had a corresponding revenue for. So this gross proposed budget is going down, but our operation budget is increasing, right? Based on those fixed costs. So where are we going to bridge the gap? It's most likely going to be in the tax levy, because we don't have another source of revenue that we can say, okay, we're going to use this to offset these additional fixed costs.
But if we get another additional revenue source, it won't be as impactful on the tax levy as part of the
That's right.
group of revenues.
Right.
All right, so back to what Ms. Rona said, this has nothing to do with Joe money, provided money, right? This is completely.
No, you know, so if we started to think about, and again, we think about it, and we're always talking about what are we going to do to continue some of these wonderful programs. We know in 2 years' time, right, that's going to start, that revenue source is not going to exist any longer. So what are we going to do? But for next year, you know, like what would we do? Would we say, oh, we're going to cut this program to come in lower? No, and that's the point I think that Dr. Gallagher was making, is that we don't necessarily want to reduce that tax levy base that then might just inhibit flexibility later on. You know, we can get ready for it. We know about it, but you know, we've had 3 years in a row of the same level of tax levy that I think, you know, if the board's willing, right, that for next year we can come up a little bit more to something that matches the level of programming that we're thinking about.
Is there any impact on the tax levy, the modifications in the tax structures for the municipalities? More commercial in the district, more our buildings in the district,
So-
impacting our budget?
So we always know that if there are more properties in the district, that's the tax base growth factor. It allows us to raise more revenue, right? That means that our ability to go above that tax levy factor increases. So for example, if we know that tax levy growth factor is 2%, the fact that now we have more property, there's a growth factor that says, oh man, well, maybe we can go to a 3% and still be within the tax cap number. That's how that works.
But if,
Right.
but if let's say a business opens up, builds a building that does business out of
Yep.
it, that extra money they're paying taxes compared to vacant property would not add more money into the tax base
No,
source?
it doesn't. And that's something that's really important. And I love to say this every year to remind people that our tax levy is a fixed number, whatever it is that we set, right? It's around $100 million right now. That's the level we're at. it gets split among the 4 classes of properties we have within the district. And within those 4 classes, let's just start class 1, because that's our single, 2, and 3 family homeowners. Everybody has a share based on whatever their assessment is. If more people move in, let's just say there's more building, we're tight here, so it's not like there are a lot of opportunities to build new housing, then that just becomes more shares, so to speak, right? The pie is cut in smaller pieces, right? So each person then pays a little bit less. It's not that we get more money, it's just that the burden is spread out among more people. So, and that goes back to the kind of the conversation we're having about the exemptions, is it's always just a shift. It's not like we will receive less money or more money, it's just a shift between all the relative taxpayers.
I'm sorry.
Yeah, I'm sorry.
Nice presentation.
Thank you.
Thank you. How much money do we still have left in the ARPA we haven't spent?
Kind of jump maybe 1.7 maybe? I'm not sure, just like, if I would have to press for a guess, I'd say about 1.7.
We have to spend it by when?
The end of September, I think 2024.
I just, I find it, as I mentioned at the last meeting, very timely that these discussions go on simultaneously with the strategic planning. Because I sometimes think when people think of strategic planning, it's like a wish list and all the things that we'd love to have. But oftentimes the price tag comes with that wish list. And this is more or less a reality testing for all of us in terms of where we are financially. And I think it's incumbent on us as a board when positions come up, when issues come up, that we be mindful of this financial future that's being presented here today. That we can't wait for May or June or next year. That whenever we have a chance to look at budget and to make thoughtful modifications, it's telling us to do that. So, and in terms of the ARP money, once again, I'm going to make the same point I made last spring. And I'm hoping it's being, I hear these wonderful programs, and that's all wonderful and good. But my intent for the ARP money was that it be targeted towards primarily academic loss. In terms of that it be targeted to tutoring, to bringing kids up where they needed to be, what they lost. I mean, everybody reads the paper, everybody sees what has happened in terms of test scores, national test scores. So I'm hoping that we invest that money in remediating the losses that our kids suffered during the COVID crisis. And I agree, some of the programs are great, but I'm not so sure some of them were necessary in terms of expenditure, and that the tutoring piece could have given greater primacy. So thanks.
Mr. DeVito, thank you for your presentation. And for many years I've been coming here and listening to your presentation. One thing that you always stand out with is your transparency.
Thank you.
And have clearly described every step of the way. You do paint a story for us. And we do need that story painted clearly so we understand where all of our taxpayer monies go. So I appreciate that.
Thank you.
And it's not your fault that health costs have gone up so much. But I am very disappointed that they would go up 10% in just 1 year.
Well, they actually went up in some categories 12 and some 22. Yeah.
Yeah, that's part of it. That's part of the financial difficulty that the state is putting on all school districts, I feel. And I don't find that just. You have given us a lot to think about, and I appreciate everything you've done. And I will now just open it up to the public. If you would like to have any questions on tonight's agenda only, please step up to the podium. Oh, I'm sorry, Mr.
Oh,
Graham.
I remember that second question.
Oh, okay, go ahead, go ahead.
Okay, you've always been a wonderful budgeter. I marvel at your ability to put together a lean budget that preserves program every year. And then, as you said, keeping it at a 0% tax levy for the last 2 years, meaning that you kept it at the same level for 3 years. And you've taught me a ton about budgeting, but one of the things that you taught me is that, I mean, I used to think, like, if there's all right, so say it's $145 million budget, and I would say, oh my God, we had $5 million left over. And that's like $5 million, and that's not tight at all. And the auditor would say, like, Maureen, stop, that's like super tight. So I get it that we have a super tight budget. I also know that over the past year, we have been keeping some extra money in our reserve account for Sandy-related things that were still outstanding, and that was all resolved through the capital projects that we're working on.
Yeah.
So we're really tight all around this year. But I do know that and I also know that in school districts, emergencies come up. And we need, like on tonight's budget agenda, we have a transportation budget transfer. And we have other things come up. And then sometimes you've used that health insurance category kind of like an emergency fund because you had been conservatively putting 10% in there, which I totally get now. But so with all of that being said, my question is, what will you do come January 1st of 2023 and in the 23-24 school year with those health insurance premiums being so high and with our inability to have any, to raise any other funds, to have that much, to have $4 million less revenue. I mean, it's just to me like a little perfect storm of, I remember one year the roof of the garage fell down at the high school. Like, what if those kind of things happen now? Are we in a position where we have money to cover those kind of costs?
So, thank you. To answer
I know
that
was
question.
kind of
That's okay, I come what you're saying. So for the current year, okay, we do have enough money in that health insurance line to pay for the health insurance premium increases that you see in these categories of 12 to, let's say, 23%. We had a few fewer, what we call members, right? Employees/retirees that are being covered in this year. So there's some savings there, but we're pretty much right at that level. So we're right there, right? Even though we budgeted 10%, you take a few of those people that we're no longer covering that we thought we were going to be covering, and we're right there. So that source for the current year is no longer a source for unexpected funds. So what we do is it makes our job a lot harder, that if there is some unexpected need, we got to look code by code by code and say, how is this particular code doing? Can we take 5, 50, whatever the number is, to put it and transfer it towards another area where we have an unexpected expense, like we did in transportation for this evening, right? Two things that happened to our advantage is our flood insurance came in lower than we thought. They did a complete rate change, and the way that they did their rates, and we saved up, I think, about $200,000 on our flood insurance. These things happen. We budgeted. This is what we thought it was going to be. As we went for the renewal, they said, oh, we did it differently now, and the premium is now $200 less than we thought. Great. That now becomes a source if there's an unexpected expense in the current year. Health insurance no longer, right? For next year, again, I'd rather save $300,000, knowing that it's unlikely in those cases that we're going to have that 10%, have $300,000 less in that next year to use as an unanticipated, than to say the tax levy needs to be $300,000 higher, right, to cover that higher cost. So I'd rather go down here, and that's kind of the art of the budgeting, in terms of knowing your risks, knowing what the potential exposure is, what the costs are, trying to make a good projection. But I expect that in the current year, right, we're not going to end with maybe a 2 or 3%. It's probably going to be a lot leaner, right? We're going to look if something comes up. Sometimes Dr. Gallagher will say to me, like mid-year, we'd love to do this program. Do you think we can do it? And in the past, it's been an easy yes, because we had, whether it's the pre-K grant money, because we know we got that grant, or the health insurance because it didn't go to 10%, that I say, yeah, we can do it because we're going to use these sources to transfer. This year's a little bit different, but we won't have that. If there's a calamity like we had at the high school where that ceiling of the carport ceiling came down, we used our capital reserve fund, right? We still have money in our capital reserve fund. If it comes to where there's some sort of a extraordinary need, we can take money that we have in our reserve funds and draw down upon them as a revenue source to pay for whatever that expense is. So for example, if we feel that we need money that's in our TRS line or ERS line, we can take that money from those reserve funds, pay for it, and that frees up that money that then we can use and transfer to another code. That's the backup that we have, and we do have those kinds of backups in place. And that's why, we always try to be lean. The difference between what we're talking about for next year is we can't be lean and be at zero, right? That's really the difference, is that we're always lean. We always try to be as lean as possible, but we're still going to be lean, and we're still going to need to go probably to at least a 2% on the tax levy because of those fixed costs. We'll try to keep it closer to 2 than to 3. And that'll be the conversation that we have over the next several months. But we're not going to be able to be lean so that we can do a 0. That type of thing is not going to be able to work again.
Great, thank you.
Okay.
Thank you, Studio. Again, we open the floor up to the public. Any questions on tonight's agenda only? Please step up to the podium, say your name, and your address.
Hi, Erin, 17 Vermont Street. So a couple of questions about the budget. There's a big talk about pre-K going full day. Is that cost in the budget? Do the teachers pay part of their health cost benefits? And what kind of programs, once that ARP grant runs out, like what kind of programs are we using? And is there any way to get input from parents that are currently in the school systems to say what programs absolutely did not work and what programs did work?
So let me I'll answer in reverse order. Yes, we will certainly have those conversations with parents. But we haven't really made any decisions yet about what we're cutting or adding. Once we feedback on that, we have a little bit of time. Teachers definitely do pay a portion of their health insurance. We have applied for a full-day pre-K grant that would allow us to expand the pre-K to a full-day program next year. We should know soon if that grant is officially ready to, this is the word, but we don't know that for sure yet. Once we do, we'll make an announcement to the community, but again, that'll be grant funded, so that won't be part of the budget presentation. That would be if we got the grant.
The grant pays the salaries.
Yeah.
Like,
Thank you. Thank you. Anybody else? Tonight's agenda only? Okay, thank you very much. Treasurer's report for October 2022. Mr. DeVito, once again, thank you so much for the report and for your transparency, for all your hard work. I need approval of minutes for the executive session and regular meeting of November 8th, 2022, and special meeting of November 16th, 2022. Can I have a motion?
Motion. Second.
Any discussion? Dr. Ryan?
Oh, yes.
Mrs. Pace?
I have not listened.
I know. Ms. Verona?
Yes.
Mr. Pinto?
I vote yes.
And I vote yes. Presentations of the superintendent.
I ask the board to consider item 1, student personnel.
Motion?
Motion.
Second.
Any discussion?
Welcome.
I just have one question on 1D. There's no, it says effective dates and there's no end date. Is that how it's done on a leave of absence? That's from them?
Are you?
Oh my
Wow.
Dr. Galley.
We do not know how much time she's going to need. Contractually, she has up to 180 days, so there's more than enough time, so it's to be determined.
Okay. I would just, anybody else have a? Okay. I would just like to thank Mrs. Capitafiro Farrell for her 30 years of service and dedication to our district and to our children, and we wish you the best in your retirement. Ms. Barona? Oh, any discussion? Sorry. We did discussion. Now we vote, yes? Dr. Ryan?
I vote yes.
Mrs. Pace?
Yes.
Ms. Barona?
Yes.
Mr. Pinto?
Yes.
And I vote yes.
And I'd like to introduce Andrew Romanoff, who's one of our new behavior specialists for special education. And Christopher Francavilla, who will be our new vice principal at the middle school. I ask for consider item 2, non-certificate personnel.
Motion.
Second.
Discussion?
I had a question on 2D, again, the ND, maybe this is the same thing. The end date is January 31, 2002.
2023 is many.
No, that's the type.
So that should be 2023? Okay, thank you, that's all I have.
No motion.
Now we're going to do a motion as amended for the number 5 approval of non-emergent tuition agreement. I'm sorry.
I'll make a
Still
motion.
Oh, we're still on the,
Motion.
Second.
any discussion? Dr. Ryan?
Oh, yes.
Ms. Case?
Yes.
Ms. Verona?
Yes.
Mr. Pinto?
Yes.
And I vote yes. Sorry about that, I got all confused with the numbers that she's saying.
I'd ask the board to consider item 3, which is the adoption of the tax exemptions that we discussed tonight in public meeting.
Motion?
Motion.
Second?
Second.
Any discussion?
Just to reiterate what Dr. Ryan said, if we can help publicize this, to make sure there's equity and understanding, that'd be great.
Dr. Ryan?
I vote yes.
Ms. Pace?
I vote yes as well.
Ms. Verona?
Yes.
Mr. Pinto?
Yes.
And I vote yes.
And I'd ask the board to consider items 4 through 13, with number 5 potentially as amended.
Motion?
I'll make a motion. I'll second.
Okay, any discussion? Dr. Ryan?
I vote yes.
Ms. Pace?
Yes.
Ms. Verona?
I vote yes, but if there's no 13.
Or it's 14, that's good.
Okay, just saying.
Good job. It's like a sleuth.
So I guess I vote yes, I'm not sure.
Yeah.
Or I vote yes to 13 and not even have to do 14, I'm
No,
not
there's
sure.
no 13, it's that number. 14. Could be 13.
It should be.
Yeah, it's there. I vote yes.
It's numbered.
I vote yes.
And I vote yes. Board of Education, any additional new and old business?
Yes.
Dr. Ryan?
Yeah, you already addressed the constants and all the stuff for them. I just wanted to thank two people. I want to thank Mr. Vito. I wanted to thank Mr. Kramer and Buddy Hoffman, the student here at the middle school. It was a wonderful assembly at Lindell High School, Veteran State. Celebrate the high school students who passed away in World War II. Students, fifth graders had assembly there, all fifth graders across the district. Students who graduated from high school had family members in many cases to speak of the deceased grandfather or uncle or whoever it was who passed in World War II. And there was a dedication to the lobby. And I know a lot of work went into it in terms of just getting the pictures and getting the documentation that these gentlemen did serve and did graduate from high school. So it was a wonderful assembly, and the fact that that lobby at Lindell is going to be used sort of in a memorial sense that other wars in terms of deceased members of the high school, whether it's Vietnam or subsequent wars, will be honored. Deceased members will be honored there in the lobby. But it was a very special assembly, and I just wanted to thank those three people specifically.
typically for the time they put in to organizing that or coordinating, which is that, thank you.
I just wanted to make one comment. Many of you, or those of you here may or may not have noticed that I haven't been at many of the concerts or things that are happening around the schools the last few weeks. So I just wanted to let everyone know that I had some medical stuff going on that has since resolved, thankfully, which is also why I missed some Board of Ed meetings. But it's not because I don't want to be there. So I just wanted to make that known. If you've noticed my absence, it was because of that. And moving forward, now we've been much better. I will try as I may to attend everything that I possibly can. So I just wanted to say that. And I also want to welcome our new hires to the district.
Ms. Verona?
I have two quick questions. Could we have an update? I understand there was some problem with the pool boiler, the boiler at the high school pool. Sir, and that it was in the process of getting fixed, but I'm not sure. Do we have a pool that students can swim in?
Yes, Mrs. Verona, good news to share that that issue has been resolved.
Okay, excellent. I only have one other really quick question. I understand that at the middle school and high school, there's a new lunch component called a fruit juice gel, as in gel. Could you tell us what that is?
Sure. It's kind of almost like a Jello and a gummy. I did try it, so I can tell you firsthand that it's good. And it's a fruit, it could be substituted as a fruit. And it's again another option. It's healthy. It's no additional sugar. It's it's kind of like a natural Jello in a way. And it's just again to try to get kids to eat healthy, something that will engage them. And so far we got some good feedback on it. We just introduced it. It's
Okay.
like in a little cup.
Could I purchase one and you could pick it up for me and give it to me, or let me into the high school to go purchase for myself? Because this is sounding to me like the great frozen yogurt scam in my book. Frozen yogurt in my book is not a lunch. It's not a lunch.
No, this isn't a lunch. This is just a component.
I should say, but it's frozen yogurt. So frozen yogurt's an entire lunch. It's not even a component. Oh, please, okay. Is it portable? Or maybe I'll just go over the.
Yeah, no, I will arrange to have one for you.
Okay, great,
It'll
that
be
would
my
be great.
pleasure.
Thank you, and I just want to wish everybody here and everybody district-wide and this table happy holidays.
I just had a quick question, probably for Dr. Gallagher. I was told that there was an opportunity for students within the district to attend a trip in regards to the Names Not Numbers program that goes on within the district. Can you elaborate a little bit?
Sure, so, as you know, for a variety of reasons, primarily safety reasons, we do not, as a district, sponsor or sanction any international trips. We made that decision a few years ago, sadly, but that is our stance. That being said, there are trips that happen, particularly in more languages, and sponsored by outside companies that we know about, so we participate in them. Certainly if students are out, given the opportunity to make up their work, whatever, no penalization or anything, it's a parent's choice ultimately if they participate in that trip. And I did hear that an outside group again is offering to run a trip for the students who are in that program, the Israeli Culture Club, and I guess any other students who might be interested to visit both Poland and Israel as a kind of a Holocaust education study in the spring. Again, we're not supporting or sanctioning that trip in any way. It's not a district-sponsored trip, it's an outside organization, but as with our other similarly provided trips, we will work with any students who want to go so that they can make up their work and not be penalized in any way, as we would if parents didn't want a great education trip.
Well, great. Just want to echo the sentiment of happy holiday, New Year, everyone. If we don't see each other until then.
I have a quick question. Some parents have brought their concerns to me about the vaping issue at the school. I know that this has been an ongoing issue and that our team has been working very hard to find solutions. Can you please elaborate?
I sure can. So, this is an issue here and just about every high school that I know. We have taken several steps in the past, including making sensors, including education prevention. Our current system has teachers on duty monitoring traffic in and out of the bathrooms. We have already approved over $2 million in capital improvements that will be constructed into bathrooms over the next summer. You know how this works. We have to approve it first, then it goes to state ed. It takes about 2 years to actually do it. And the primary reason for that is to create bathrooms that are less conducive to vaping, that are more open and safer stall. We are also working on some other plans though, and we may even have some additional grant funding to do that over the next maybe 1 or 2 months. So if we could revisit the question again, maybe at the end of January, I may have even some more things to share that we're working on and planning. But it literally is a conversation. We're always looking into different ways to address this and to really be at the forefront of that in terms of.
Right. Thank you. Mr. DeVito, my next question is really for you. It seems to be a little bit of an issue with the boiler at the middle school. Can you please tell us what protocols you've been following to help prevent against any more fire alarms from happening?
So the good news is that we feel today that the issues that have come up over the past couple of weeks have been resolved. It's very long in terms of what has happened over the past couple of weeks. There were 3 boilers in the boiler room that's right between Lido and the middle school, and is responsible for heating a section of this building. We had failures with 2 of the working boilers. The 3rd boiler had a problem last year and it's been out of service. As you may recall, updating those boilers is something that was approved last May. So it's in the works. So we just need to keep moving along until we get that complete boiler and heating system overhaul that we had the money for and it's already been approved. So we just have to keep things going. And a couple of things like that, even as small as there was a screw that was missing in the unit, the exhaust unit, that was allowing too much air to come in, so we weren't getting the proper burn. And I'm again speaking very like a high level, that was causing an actual fire in the exhaust area. And that's why the alarm was triggered. Like the alarm did what it was supposed to do. You know, it wasn't like a false alarm. It was actually too much oil that was going into that ducted system and was actually igniting. And that's what happened. The heat sensors went off and we had smoke condition. And it happened, that's responsible for 1 degree. So there were like 3 different things that happened similar to that where something malfunctioned in whether it was boiler number 1, boiler number 2, and caused an evacuation. And we've had technicians in almost daily trying to resolve this, trying to troubleshoot, bringing in parts and trying to figure out. We even had to disassemble that ductwork because we knew something was happening there and to investigate it. And then we found out that there was some sort of a literal screw that came loose. But at this point, we've had a good week so far, no problems, and we feel really comfortable that it will continue this way. I can't promise, but we feel comfortable that those issues that were causing the problems, what you heard as flame failures or other things, are now have now been resolved.
Thank you. I don't know if many of you know, but last week when they were doing the middle school play, there was a fire alarm, and the students, we all had to actually exit the building. And the firemen came very quickly, and our district was amazing with how well they tried to resolve the issue. But I also wanted to really highlight that the middle school staff and administration made sure that our children had another chance to show that play. So they did have their second night, and I believe that everybody in the audience was extremely appreciative of that. So thank you very much for that. I also want to let people know that the high school, they have their concerts this weekend, the orchestra and the band, so those are really great shows for you to go and see if you can. And I just want to say there's a lot of work that goes into our district that's all volunteer. People donate their time and they come and they speak to us and they go on their committees and they go above and beyond for our students. So I really want to thank and extend my thanks to all of you who do that. My trustees, our Board of Education, our Central Administration, would like to thank you so much for all of your hard work and your dedication. You also volunteer a lot of your time and you go above and beyond and you do what you can for our students. We put our students first as much as we can. And I want to thank our staff, our teachers, our transportation, our security, our custodians, our parents, and just
Leave
everybody.
anybody out.
I don't want to leave anybody out.
Service.
And food service, our guidance counselors, everybody, because you all make our situation, our schools. I'm nurses. Yes.
Our social work,
Our social workers,
our psychology.
Our OTs, our PTs.
Technology.
Technology, yes, thank you. Really, it does, it takes the efforts of everybody, and you create a beautiful, positive atmosphere in our schools. So thank you. Happy holidays to everybody. Now we're going to open up the floor to the public. Questions and comments from the public, please announce your name, your address, and please come up to the podium.
Good evening. My name is Chase Kramer. I'm 12 years old and I live at 361 East Broadway. And I attend Long Beach Middle School and I'm in 7th grade. I plan on getting involved in student government next year and I thought it would be a good time to start advocating for students in our school. There are 2 items I would like to address that I think would benefit all students. 1. Every day my parents pay for school lunch. They ask me what I get. Our response is always the same, 1 or 2 bag of chips. The reason is that the quality of the food is unacceptable. The food tastes terrible and is often outdated. I receive outdated milk and stale bagels. The students feel the food is expensive and that something should be done to improve the quality, more importantly, the taste. Should we as students be offered healthy options that taste good? Please provide something more enticing than a bag of chips. Number 3, bring back the frozen yogurt. They still have that in high school, why can't we? And respectfully, Mr. Romeo, frozen yogurt is a good lunch option, that's better than a bag of chips. The second element I would like to address should be addressed immediately. The bathroom situation at LBMS. The 100 hallway bathrooms are extremely unsanitary. They should be cleaned between classes. The bathroom stall doors are missing and we deserve privacy when we need to go. And it is not healthy when we hold them. Thank you for your time. Happy holidays.
Thank you so much for coming up and advocating so beautifully for yourself and for your fellow students.
Good job, Chief. You should run.
Yes, you should.
I just want to say to you that those 2 issues that you brought up is something that we are working on, and we appreciate you saying that, and we will make sure that we follow up with the people who are in charge of those areas. I know that Mr. Swan and the food service director are really working on better options for lunch. There's some rules that we have to follow in the district that make sometimes that's hard to do, but we're really going to try to fix it because we heard that from the students who responded to the strategic plan. And the bathrooms, we have the money in the budget, we're going to renovate them. If you have ideas for us, one of the problems we're having is vandalism by students. So if you want to maybe talk to your friends and come up with some good ideas about how we can maybe control that a little better or control it or encourage people not to do it, that would be great, but we'll make sure that we talk to the custodial staff and make sure they're managed. So thanks for doing that.
I do have one question about that bathroom. How many stalls are in that bathroom?
In the women's hallway, there's 3 stalls and 2 of the stall doors are missing.
2 out of 3.
Yeah, 2 and 2.
So that's something we'll talk about, but thank you for bringing that up, because that's not something that I was aware of, and that's not okay, and privacy is a big thing, so thank you.
Thank you very much. You did bring up excellent points, Chase. Thank you. The food service has been something that we've been working on for quite some time. So keep your advice coming, and let us know what you think.
Apparently now you get gel free.
Yeah, gel, go get the fruit gel. And I also spend on the table initiative as well. It's at the middle school.
Okay, next is coming.
Yes, I'm coming next, you got it. Long Beach,
No? Anybody else?
oh, anybody else comment, sorry. Long Beach Classroom Teachers Association.
What flavor jelly are you going to get?
What flavors are there?
I can tell you.
Could you check it out tomorrow when we get?
I'm not allowed to purchase from churches on, but I can, I'll try. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. For, I just want to see by welcoming Mr. Romanoff and Mr. Rebella to Long Beach. It's a great place, I'm sure you're going to love it, and look forward to working with you. We shift gears, and just wanted to mention that as an organization, it is extremely important to us to give back to the community that gives us so much. And to that extent, since your last meeting, we've done 2 successful fundraisers. One was for the Long Beach Food Pantry, and we were able to make a very successful donation to the Long Beach Outreach. In addition to this week, we're wrapping up our toy drive, in which we're going to be able to donate 100 gift bags to the Little Snake Egg Foundation during the holiday season. It's 2 amazing things. Closing, this time of the year, just want to say may the peace and joy of the holiday season be with you and your families throughout this upcoming year.
Thank you. Administrative Supervisor of the PPS Group.
Hi, good evening, Keith Eastman. First of all, I'd like to professionally and personally thank Kelly Lewis for his years of service here, and we wish him best of luck in his future endeavors. I'd like to congratulate Ed Romanoff, welcome to the district. Also, I'd like to congratulate and welcome Mr. Frank Amelia, Mr. F. I hope I got it right. And then also like to wish everyone a happy and healthy holiday break in the holiday season. Thank you.
Thank you. LBSCA, Long Beach School Employees Association, New State. PTA. And well, thank you everyone for coming out. Happy holidays. Motion to adjourn.
Motion.
Second. All in favor? Aye.